I'm Hazel Morgan, 29 years old, and I never imagined my own parents would ban me from my brother's wedding because of how I looked. Standing in my childhood bedroom, staring at the bridesmaid dress I'd never wear, their words echoed, "Hazel, honey, maybe it's better if you're not there. You know how photos are important, and Connor wants everything perfect." The dress slipped from my trembling hands. Perfect. I wasn't perfect enough for my own family. But they had no idea what perfect really meant. Before we dive into this story of family betrayal and ultimate triumph, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever felt like the black sheep of your family, and don't forget to subscribe because this tale of revenge is just getting started. Trust me, you won't believe what happens when a family pushes the wrong daughter too far. Growing up in suburban Columbus, Ohio, our family looked perfect from the outside. My parents, Robert and Catherine Morgan, owned Morgan Construction Company, a thriving business that built half the subdivisions in our area. Dad drove a shiny black pickup truck with the company logo, and Mom wore designer clothes to every school function. They were the picture of American success, and they never let anyone forget it. Then there was my brother Connor, 3 years younger but somehow always ahead of me in my parents' eyes. Connor was everything I wasn't: tall, athletic, effortlessly charming, and blessed with the kind of golden boy looks that made teachers and coaches fawn over him. He played varsity football, dated the homecoming queen, and somehow managed to coast through school while I struggled with thick glasses, stubborn acne, and what my mother diplomatically called baby fat, well into my 20s. I can't count how many times I heard variations of the same conversation growing up. "Why can't you be more like Connor?" Mom would ask when I brought home a B+ instead of an A. "Connor never has trouble making friends," Dad would comment when I spent another weekend at home reading instead of at some party. It was like living with a constant measuring stick that I could never quite reach. But I kept trying. God, how I kept trying. I threw myself into art and design, discovering a talent that neither of my parents understood or valued. While Connor was throwing footballs, I was creating digital masterpieces on my computer. While he was collecting trophies for sports, I was winning regional design competitions. But somehow, my achievements always got buried under his latest victory. The dynamic only got worse when Connor started dating Brittany Walsh during his senior year of college. Brittany was everything my parents thought a daughter should be: petite, blonde, bubbly, and completely devoted to Connor's every need. She had this way of making everything about her seem effortless, from her perfectly curled hair to her tiny waist to her ability to laugh at all of Dad's terrible jokes. I'll admit, I felt jealous sometimes. Not of Connor, but of how easy everything seemed for both of them. By the time Connor graduated with his business degree and started working in real estate, I had already established my own graphic design company, lost 40 pounds, traded my glasses for contacts, and finally found a skincare routine that worked. I thought things were changing. I thought maybe my family was finally starting to see me as an adult, as someone worthy of respect. I was so incredibly wrong. The engagement announcement came on a Sunday in March, right after Mom's famous pot roast dinner. Connor stood up, his arm around Brittany's shoulders, and announced that he'd proposed during their weekend getaway to Charleston. The ring was massive, at least 2 carats, and caught the light perfectly as Brittany held out her hand for everyone to admire. "We're thinking a fall wedding," Brittany chirped, her voice honey-sweet. "Something elegant but not too formal. Maybe at the country club?" Mom immediately jumped into planning mode, her eyes lighting up in a way I'd never seen before. "Oh, honey, we'll make it absolutely magical. No expense spared. This is going to be the wedding of the century." Dad pulled out his phone, already calculating costs, but he was smiling. "Whatever you kids want. Connor deserves the best." I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, waiting for someone to include me in the conversation. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Congratulations, you two. I'm really happy for you." Brittany's smile flickered for just a moment. "Thanks, Hazel. Actually, I was hoping to ask you something." She glanced at Connor, then back at me. "Would you be one of my bridesmaids?" My heart soared. Finally, finally, I was going to be included. I would love that. Absolutely. Perfect. Mom clapped her hands together. All my children in the wedding. This is going to be so special. But 2 weeks later, Brittany called and asked to meet for coffee. I should have known something was wrong by the way she kept fidgeting with her engagement ring, twisting it around her finger like she was nervous. So, about the bridesmaid thing, she started, not quite meeting my eyes. I've been thinking, and well, all the other girls are going to be so put together, you know? Rachel's a model, and Emma's getting ready for pageant season, and Jessica just finished her fitness competition. I felt my stomach drop. Okay? I just think maybe you should, do something about your appearance before the wedding. Like, maybe see if you can lose a little more weight? And maybe something with your hair? It's just so, plain. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd thought I looked good. I'd thought the changes I'd made were working. Brittany, I'm not trying to be mean, she interrupted, her voice taking on a wounded tone. I just want my wedding to be perfect, and the photos are going to be everywhere. You understand, right? I didn't understand. I didn't understand how someone could ask me to be in their wedding and then immediately start listing everything wrong with me. But I nodded anyway, because that's what I always did. Sure. I'll see what I can do. When I got home and told Mom about the conversation, I expected support. I expected her to be offended on my behalf, to tell me I was beautiful just the way I was. Instead, she got that thoughtful look she always wore when she was solving a problem. Well, honey, Brittany has a point. Weddings are expensive, and the photos really are forever. Maybe this is just the motivation you need to finally get serious about taking care of yourself. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized that my mother had just agreed that I wasn't good enough for my own brother's wedding photos. The woman who was supposed to love me unconditionally had looked at me and found me lacking. But that was just the beginning. 3 days later, Mom sat me down in the living room, her hands folded in her lap like she was about to deliver bad news. Hazel, your father and I have been talking, and we think maybe it would be better if you weren't in the wedding party. What? The word came out as a whisper. It's not personal, sweetheart. It's just that Brittany has such a specific vision, and all her other friends are so coordinated. You know how important this is to Connor. He only gets married once, hopefully, and we want everything to be absolutely perfect. But she asked me to be a bridesmaid. And that was lovely of her to include you. But sometimes being included means making sacrifices for the greater good. You could still come to the wedding, of course. Maybe sit in the back where you'll be comfortable. Comfortable. Like I was an embarrassing relative who needed to be hidden away. Mom, are you seriously uninviting me from Connor's wedding because I'm not pretty enough? Don't be dramatic, Hazel. We're not uninviting you. We're just suggesting that maybe, for everyone's comfort, you might want to consider whether attending is the best choice. I sat there, speechless, as my mother calmly explained why my presence would ruin my brother's special day. She used words like realistic and practical and what's best for the family, but what I heard was clear: you're not good enough to be seen with us. The next few days passed in a haze of hurt and confusion. I kept replaying the conversation with Mom, wondering if I'd misunderstood, if maybe I was being too sensitive. But then Connor called, and his words shattered any remaining hope I had. Hey, Hazel. Mom told me about your conversation. I just want you to know I think you're making the right choice by stepping back from the wedding party. I didn't make a choice, Connor. I was pushed out. His laugh was uncomfortable. Come on, don't be like that. You know how Brittany is about aesthetics. She's been planning this wedding since she was 12. It's not about you personally. Then what is it about? The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he sighed. Look, Hazel, we both know you've always been different from the rest of the family. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but for something like this, where everything needs to flow together, maybe it's just better this way. Different. There was that word again. Different had always been code for wrong in my family. But it wasn't until my cousin Tyler accidentally sent me a screenshot meant for someone else that I realized how deep this betrayal really went. The image showed a group chat called Morgan Family Planning that included Mom, Dad, Connor, Brittany, and several other relatives. My name wasn't on the participant list. The conversation thread Tyler had captured was from 2 weeks before Brittany's coffee invitation. Mom. We need to figure out what to do about the Hazel situation for the wedding. Connor, what do you mean? Mom, Brittany wants her as a bridesmaid, but honestly, have you seen the other girls? Hazel is going to stick out like a sore thumb. Dad, maybe we can put her in charge of something behind the scenes? Guest book or something? Brittany, I already asked her to be a bridesmaid. I can't take it back without looking like a complete witch. Connor. Just tell her she needs to lose weight and fix her hair. If she can't do that, she'll probably bow out on her own. Mom, brilliant. That way it's her choice, not ours. I stared at that screen until my eyes burned. They had planned this. They had sat around discussing me like I was a problem to be solved, a decoration that didn't match the room. The invitation to be a bridesmaid hadn't been genuine, it had been a setup to make me eliminate myself. Tyler called me 20 minutes later, panic in his voice. Hazel, oh God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to send that. My phone got mixed up and... How long has that chat existed, Tyler? What? How long have you all been talking about me behind my back? Another long pause. Hazel, it's not like that. It's just wedding planning. Everyone's stressed. Answer the question. Since Connor and Brittany got engaged. But it's not all about you. We talk about lots of stuff. I hung up and immediately called the phone number Tyler had sent the screenshot from, demanding access to the full conversation. What I discovered made my stomach turn. Months of messages discussing the Hazel problem. Debates about whether I should even be invited to family events. Conversations analyzing my appearance, my career, my lack of a boyfriend. They'd been making bets on whether I'd ever find someone willing to put up with her. One message from Dad particularly stung. She's always been the odd one out. Maybe it's time to stop pretending otherwise. Connor had responded, I just don't want her weirdness to affect my wedding. Brittany's friends are going to judge our whole family based on this. But it was Mom's reply that broke something inside me. Don't worry, honey. We've been managing the Hazel situation for years. She'll fall in line like she always does. Managing the Hazel situation. Like I was a chronic illness they'd learned to live with. I scrolled back through months of messages, seeing my life discussed and dissected by people who were supposed to love me. They talked about my business like it was a cute hobby that would never amount to anything. They shared screenshots of my social media posts and made jokes about my appearance. They'd even been telling extended family that I was going through a difficult phase, to explain why I missed gatherings I was never actually invited to. The worst part was discovering that this wasn't new. Tyler's phone had messages going back almost 2 years, with similar conversations about family events I'd mysteriously not heard about. Christmas parties I was told were cancelled but apparently happened without me. Birthday celebrations I found out about through social media after the fact. I sat on my couch that night, laptop open, scrolling through 2 years of evidence that my family had been systematically excluding and mocking me. Every family photo on social media suddenly made sense. Every time I'd felt confused about plans that seemed to change without my knowledge. Every awkward conversation where relatives seemed to know things about family events that I didn't. They'd been erasing me from our family story one conversation at a time. The final blow came when I remembered last Christmas dinner. I'd felt so proud bringing homemade gifts for everyone, beautiful custom design pieces I'd spent weeks creating. Mom had smiled and said all the right words, but now I remembered the look she'd shared with Dad when she thought I wasn't looking. That knowing, patient smile you'd give a child who'd proudly presented you with a crayon drawing. They'd been humoring me. All of them. For years. The breaking point came when I decided to clean out my childhood bedroom to make space for a home office. Mom had been after me for years to deal with all that old junk, and I finally felt ready to sort through the remnants of my teenage years. What I found buried in the back of my closet changed everything. Hidden behind old yearbooks and boxes of art supplies was a manila envelope with my name written in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. Grandma Rose had passed away when I was 22, and I'd never seen this envelope before. Inside were documents, jewelry appraisals, and a handwritten note dated just months before her death. My dearest Hazel, the note began, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, but I wanted you to have something that's rightfully yours. Your parents seem to think I don't notice how they treat you compared to Connor, but I see everything. The jewelry in this box belonged to my mother and grandmother, and it should go to the granddaughter who shares my artistic spirit. I've had everything appraised, and it's worth quite a bit. More importantly, it's your heritage. Don't let anyone tell you it belongs to the family generally. It belongs to you specifically. There's also information about a small trust fund I set up for your education. Your parents were supposed to tell you about it when you turned 21. Love always, Grandma Rose. My hands shook as I opened the jewelry box. Inside were pieces I'd never seen before, a stunning Art Deco necklace, antique earrings with intricate filigree work, and a ring that took my breath away. The appraisal documents were dated just weeks before Grandma's death, and the total value was over $60,000. $60,000 worth of family heirlooms that my parents had hidden from me for 7 years. But it was the trust fund documents that made my blood run cold. Grandma Rose had indeed set up an education fund for me, worth $25,000 when I turned 21. According to the paperwork, my parents had been the trustees, responsible for informing me about the fund and helping me access it for educational expenses. I'd struggled to pay for college, taking out student loans and working 2 part-time jobs while Connor's education was fully funded by our parents. They'd watched me stress about money, watched me eat ramen noodles for dinner so I could afford textbooks, and never once mentioned that I had funds available specifically for education. The phone rang as I sat surrounded by evidence of their lies. Mom's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered not answering. But I needed to hear how she'd explain this away. Hi, honey. I was just thinking about you. How's the room cleaning going? I found Grandma Rose's envelope. The silence stretched for so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Mom cleared her throat. What envelope, sweetheart? Don't. Just don't. I have the jewelry, the appraisals, the trust fund documents, all of it. I know you've been lying to me for 7 years. Hazel, you're being dramatic. Your grandmother left those things to the family, not to you specifically. And that money was used for family expenses during a difficult time. The trust was specifically designated for my education. You stole my college fund. We didn't steal anything. We made difficult financial decisions during the recession. Connor needed what? His brand new car? His fully paid tuition? His spring break trips? You don't understand the pressures we were under. Sometimes parents have to make choices. You chose Connor. You've always chosen Connor. And now you're choosing him again by trying to hide me away during his wedding. Mom's voice turned sharp. If you're going to act like this, maybe it really is better if you don't come to the wedding at all. This kind of negativity isn't good for anyone. I hung up and immediately called my bank. Within an hour, I had an appointment with a financial advisor and a lawyer. If my parents wanted to play hardball, I was ready to play. The jewelry was legally mine, clearly designated in Grandma Rose's will, which I found copies of in her papers. The trust fund was more complicated, but the lawyer assured me that using educational funds for non-educational purposes while the designated beneficiary was actively pursuing education constituted a breach of fiduciary duty. My first counterstrike was simple but effective. I walked into the bank where my parents kept their safety deposit box number still written in Grandma's papers, and legally reclaimed my inheritance. The bank manager was apologetic but clear. The will was specific, and I was the rightful owner of the jewelry. When I got home, I found 17 missed calls from Mom and 12 from Dad. I let them go to voicemail while I photographed each piece of jewelry and researched its history. Some of these pieces dated back to the 1890s, family heirlooms that told the story of the women who came before me. Women who had probably never imagined their legacy would be hidden away to avoid embarrassing a golden boy grandson. Dad finally caught me at home that evening, pounding on my door until I answered. "You had no right to take that jewelry, Hazel. Your mother is beside herself." "I had every right. It's legally mine. That jewelry belongs to this family. It should go to Connor's children someday. Connor can buy his own family heirlooms with the money he didn't have to borrow for college." Dad's face turned red. "If you don't return those pieces immediately, you're not welcome in this house anymore." "Is that supposed to be a threat? You've already made it clear I'm not welcome at family events. What exactly am I losing?" He stormed off, but not before shouting that I was destroying this family with my selfishness. I watched him peel out of my driveway and felt something shift inside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't backing down. I wasn't apologizing for existing. I wasn't making myself smaller to accommodate their comfort. It felt terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Despite everything that had happened, or maybe because of it, I decided I was going to Connor's wedding. Not as a hidden embarrassment in the back row, not as the family member who graciously stepped aside for everyone else's comfort, but as a woman who belonged there as much as anyone else. I spent 3 weeks preparing. Professional hair consultation, makeup artist appointment, personal stylist session. I bought a dress that cost more than my rent, deep emerald green silk that complemented my skin tone and hugged my curves in all the right places. I wore Grandma Rose's Art Deco necklace, the one that had been hidden from me for 7 years, and when I looked in the mirror the morning of the wedding, I barely recognized myself. For the first time in my adult life, I felt beautiful. The wedding was at Brookside Country Club, the same place where my parents had celebrated their anniversary every year and where Connor had learned to play golf. I arrived fashionably late, walking into the ceremony just as the processional music began. The dress code had been elegant cocktail attire, and I had nailed it. I found a seat in the middle section, not hidden in the back but not presumptuous enough to sit with immediate family. From where I sat, I could see Mom's profile, and I watched her do a literal double take when she spotted me. Her mouth fell open, and she grabbed Dad's arm, whispering furiously in his ear. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Brittany looked stunning in her princess-style gown, and Connor looked genuinely happy as he waited for her at the altar. For a moment, I felt sad about what we'd all lost in this family war. These should have been happy memories we were making together. But then Connor's eyes found me in the crowd, and his expression shifted from joy to anger to something that looked almost like fear. He stumbled slightly over his vows, his attention clearly divided between his bride and his uninvited sister sitting boldly in plain view. The reception was where things got interesting. I'd done my homework and knew the guest list included several of Dad's business associates, people who knew me as the talented daughter who'd started her own design company. As cocktail hour began, I found myself surrounded by compliments. "Hazel. You look absolutely stunning." Mrs. Peterson from Dad's Rotary Club grabbed my hands. "I saw your work on the Williams house renovation. Brilliant design sense. Thank you so much. It's always wonderful to work with clients who appreciate creativity." Mr. Williams himself appeared beside us. "Speaking of which, my wife has been after me to call you about our new lake house. She wants that same magic you worked on our main house." I spent the first hour of the reception networking, collecting business cards, and accepting compliments on my appearance and my work. Several people mentioned they'd heard about my company and wanted to discuss potential projects. It was exactly the kind of professional interaction I'd been hoping for. Meanwhile, I could see my parents across the room, their expressions growing more strained by the minute. Mom kept glancing over at me with a look that could have curdled milk, while Dad's jaw was so tight I worried he might crack a tooth. The confrontation came during dinner. Brittany, radiant in her reception dress, appeared at my table with Connor trailing behind her. Hazel. Her voice was honey-sweet but her eyes were ice-cold. I'm so surprised to see you here. I thought we discussed that you weren't going to attend. I think there was some confusion about that. I never agreed not to come to my own brother's wedding. You're causing a scene, Connor hissed, his face flushed. People are staring. People are staring because I look good. That seems to be the real problem here. Brittany's composure cracked slightly. You're trying to upstage me on my wedding day. That dress is completely inappropriate. The dress code was elegant cocktail attire. This dress is elegant cocktail attire. That necklace is way too flashy for a wedding guest. This necklace belonged to my grandmother. It's the same necklace Mom wore to your engagement party, actually. The lie rolled off my tongue smoothly, and I watched Brittany's eyes widen as she tried to remember whether that was true. The confusion gave me the opening I needed. But please, don't let me keep you from your other guests. I'm sure you have lots of people to thank for coming. Connor stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. If you don't leave right now, I'm going to have security escort you out. On what grounds? I was invited to this wedding by the groom's parents. If you want to throw me out, you'll need to explain to all their business associates why you're having your sister forcibly removed from your reception. For a moment, I thought he might actually do it. His hands clenched into fists, and I could see him calculating the social cost of making a scene. But then Mr. Peterson approached our little group, and Connor's expression shifted back to charming groom mode. Connor. Wonderful ceremony, son. And Hazel, I meant to tell you earlier, my wife Sarah absolutely loves the business cards you designed for her flower shop. She's gotten at least 6 new clients who mentioned seeing your work. I smiled graciously while Connor and Brittany stood frozen beside me. Please tell Sarah I'm so glad they're working well for her. Word of mouth is the best advertising. We'll definitely be calling you about that lake house project. Sarah's already got a whole Pinterest board started. He chuckled and moved on to congratulate the bride and groom. Brittany's face had gone pale beneath her professional makeup. You're deliberately trying to ruin my wedding. I'm attending my brother's wedding and talking to family friends about business. If that ruins your day, maybe the problem isn't me. She turned on her heel and stalked away, Connor following like a lost puppy. But not before he leaned close to my ear and whispered, "You're going to regret this." The photographer found me during the dancing portion of the evening. Marcus was a freelancer Brittany had hired, and he'd been capturing candid moments throughout the reception. I have to ask, he said, showing me the back of his camera, who are you? Because you're absolutely photogenic, and you're in some of my best shots of the evening. On his camera screen was a photo of me laughing with Uncle Frank, both of us looking genuinely happy. The lighting was perfect, my dress looked incredible, and I was glowing with confidence. I'm the groom's sister. Why? Because the bride just asked me to delete any photos that include you, and I'm not comfortable doing that. These are good photos, and your family. It feels wrong. My heart raced. What did you tell her? I told her I'd review the photos with the couple after the honeymoon and we could discuss which ones they want in the final album. But honestly, some of these are the best shots of the night. It would be a shame to lose them. I looked at the camera screen again, at this version of myself I'd never seen before. Confident, beautiful, belonging. Can you send me copies of the ones I'm in? From my own records? Absolutely. When I finally left the reception, I felt victorious. Not because I'd ruined anyone's night, but because I'd refused to be erased. I'd shown up as my authentic self and reminded everyone present that I was part of this family, whether they liked it or not. I had no idea how much that small act of defiance was going to cost me. The retaliation began on Monday morning. I was in my home office, working on a logo design for a new client, when my phone rang. Janet Morrison, owner of a boutique hotel chain I'd been designing marketing materials for, was calling 3 days earlier than our scheduled check-in. Hazel, I'm so sorry to do this over the phone, but I'm afraid we're going to have to terminate our contract. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. I'm sorry, what? Did I miss something? The designs you approved last week were exactly what you requested. The designs are fine, honey. It's just, well, I got a call from your father yesterday. He seemed very concerned about your mental state, and honestly, after what he told me, I can't risk having my business associated with someone who might be unstable. My father had called my client and sabotaged my business relationship. What exactly did he tell you? He said you've been having some kind of breakdown since your brother's wedding, making scenes, acting erratically. He was worried you might not be able to handle the pressure of a big contract like ours. He suggested I check your references more carefully. The room started spinning. Janet, I can assure you that. I'm sure you're a lovely person, dear, but I have to protect my business. I'll send payment for the work you've already completed, but we won't be needing the rest of the project. She hung up before I could respond. I sat staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. My own father had deliberately sabotaged my business, lying to my clients about my mental health to destroy my professional reputation. Within 24 hours, I'd lost 2 more clients. The story was always the same, a concerned phone call from Robert Morgan, worried about his daughter's psychological state, suggesting they might want to reconsider working with someone so unstable. By Wednesday, Connor had joined the campaign. His real estate connections ran deep in our area, and he used every single one of them. Property developers who might have hired me for marketing projects suddenly stopped returning my calls. The local Chamber of Commerce, where Dad had served on the board for 15 years, quietly removed my business from their recommended vendors list. But the cruelest blow came from Brittany. While I was scrambling to save my remaining client relationships, she had started a whisper campaign on social media. Nothing actionable, nothing I could prove, just carefully worded posts about toxic family members and people who can't handle other people's happiness. Her friends picked up the theme, sharing vague posts about wedding crashers and attention-seeking behavior. They never mentioned my name, but the photos were clearly from Connor's wedding, and anyone who followed the breadcrumbs could figure out who they were talking about. The social media harassment was sophisticated and cruel. They'd comment on my business posts with innocent-seeming questions that planted seeds of doubt. Is this the same Hazel from that wedding drama? I heard she's been having some issues lately. They'd share my work posts but add their own commentary about supporting local businesses but being careful who you work with. Within 2 weeks, my business phone had stopped ringing entirely. Even worse, I discovered that my parents had been intercepting my mail. Business correspondence I'd been waiting for had never arrived, and when I confronted the postal service, they told me that Robert Morgan had filled out a mail forwarding form claiming I'd moved. I was hemorrhaging money with no new income, and my savings were disappearing fast between lawyer fees for the trust fund case and the cost of basic living expenses. For the first time since starting my business, I was facing the real possibility of bankruptcy. The final straw came when my landlord called. Tom Chen had been renting to me for 3 years without a single problem, but suddenly he was concerned about my situation. Look, Hazel, you're a good tenant, but I got a call from Connor Morgan yesterday. He's handling the real estate for the new development behind this building, and he mentioned you might be having some financial difficulties. What kind of financial difficulties? He said your business was failing and you might not be able to make rent. He suggested I might want to start looking for a new tenant, just to be safe. Connor was using his position in real estate to threaten my housing. Tom, I've never been late with rent. You know that. I know. But he seemed really concerned about you. Said your family was worried about your mental health after some kind of incident at his wedding. Look, I don't want to get involved in family drama, but I also can't afford to have a tenant who might default on rent. He gave me 30 days to find a new place, citing concerns about tenant stability as grounds for non-renewal. 30 days to find a new apartment in a market where Connor's real estate connections could sabotage any rental application I submitted. I hung up the phone and finally broke down. I'd been so focused on fighting back, on refusing to be erased, that I hadn't fully grasped how coordinated their attack was. They weren't just excluding me from family events anymore. They were systematically destroying my ability to support myself. But it was the conversation I overheard between Mom and Dad that nearly destroyed me completely. I'd gone to their house to retrieve some business equipment I'd stored in their garage, using my old house key since they hadn't asked for it back yet. I was loading boxes into my car when I heard their voices through the open kitchen window. "Do you think we're being too harsh?" Mom was asking. She looked so defeated when she came to get those boxes. "She brought this on herself," Dad replied. "If she'd just apologized after the wedding, if she'd just admitted she was wrong, none of this would have been necessary." I never sent the suicide note, but writing it scared me enough to realize how close I was to the edge. The combination of financial pressure, social isolation, and family betrayal had pushed me into a darker place than I'd ever been. I was staying on my friend Emma's couch, having lost my apartment when I couldn't find a rental that Connor's real estate network hadn't poisoned. Emma found me on her bathroom floor at 3 a.m, panic attack in full swing, hyperventilating so badly I thought I was dying. She drove me to the emergency room, where a kind doctor explained that severe stress can mimic heart attack symptoms and recommended I see both a therapist and a lawyer. "This level of coordinated harassment isn't normal family conflict," Dr. Angela Martinez told me during my first therapy session. "What you're describing is systematic abuse designed to isolate and control you. The fact that it's coming from family members doesn't make it less serious." She connected me with a support group for adults dealing with family abuse, and for the first time, I heard my experience reflected in other people's stories. The isolation tactics, the financial sabotage, the way they'd weaponized other family members against me, all of it followed predictable patterns. "The hardest part is that outsiders don't understand," shared Maria, a woman about my age whose parents had disowned her for marrying someone they didn't approve of. "People expect family to love you unconditionally. They can't wrap their heads around parents who see their children as possessions to control rather than people to support." But it was Uncle Frank who became my unexpected lifeline. Dad's older brother had always been the black sheep of the Morgan family, the one who'd chosen teaching over business, travel over settling down. He showed up at Emma's apartment on a Tuesday morning with coffee and a grim expression. "I heard what's been happening to you," he said without preamble. "And I want you to know that not everyone in this family has lost their damn minds." I started crying before he'd even sat down. I'd been so isolated from family that having any Morgans show up to support me felt like a miracle. "Frank, if you're here to convince me to apologize." "Hell no. I'm here to tell you that your parents have been lying to the family about you for years, and some of us are finally starting to see through it." He pulled out his phone and showed me a group text from the weekend. Mom had sent a family-wide message explaining that I was going through a severe mental health crisis, and that everyone should maintain distance for their own safety until I got the help I needed. "The thing is," Frank continued, "I've been watching this family dynamic for 30 years. I saw how they treated you growing up, how different the rules were for you and Connor. And I've been keeping my own records." From his jacket pocket, he produced a small notebook. "Every family gathering, every conversation where Robert or Catherine said something about you that didn't add up. Every time they claimed you were invited to something you clearly didn't know about. Every lie they told about your career or your life." I flipped through pages of Frank's careful handwriting, documenting years of subtle abuse and manipulation. He'd been watching, and more importantly, he'd been believing his own observations instead of their explanations. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because I thought you were handling it fine. You seemed so strong, building your business, living your own life. I didn't realize how much damage they were doing behind the scenes." His expression hardened. "But when Catherine called me last week to warn me about your dangerous mental state, I knew something was seriously wrong. You've never been dangerous to anyone but their egos." Frank had more than observations. He'd been quietly gathering evidence, including financial records showing that Connor had been embezzling from the family business for over a year. Credit card statements showed lavish purchases charged to company accounts, trips that were supposedly business-related but included spa treatments and luxury hotels in locations with no Morgan construction projects. Robert knows, Frank explained. He's been covering for Connor, moving money around to hide the theft. But the records are all there if you know where to look. More damaging were insurance claims Frank had uncovered. The family business had filed multiple claims for equipment theft and damage that never actually occurred. Dad had been systematically defrauding their insurance company for 3 years, using the money to fund Connor's lifestyle and the elaborate wedding. But here's the thing that really made me sick, Frank said, showing me a series of emails he'd printed. They've been using your mental health as a cover story for over a year. Anytime someone in the family asks why you're not at events, why you seem distant, they explain it as you struggling with depression and anxiety. They've convinced half the family that you're mentally ill and potentially dangerous. The emails were between mom and various relatives, painting a picture of a daughter who was spiraling out of control and making concerning threats against family members. According to these messages, I'd been having episodes for months, including violent outbursts and paranoid accusations against innocent family members. None of it was true, but it was documented and detailed enough that anyone reading it would be convinced I was genuinely unstable. They've been setting up this narrative in case you ever tried to fight back, Frank explained. If you expose their financial crimes or abuse, they can point to months of documentation about your mental illness and claim you're having a psychotic break. I felt sick. They'd been planning this character assassination for over a year, laying groundwork to destroy my credibility long before the wedding conflict even happened. Frank, what am I supposed to do with this? I can barely afford groceries, let alone a legal battle. You're not fighting this alone anymore. I've been documenting their crimes for months, and I know other people who've been watching this situation with growing concern. Your parents have overplayed their hand, and it's time for consequences. That evening, Frank introduced me to David Park, a private investigator who specialized in family financial crimes. David had been working pro bono on elder abuse cases, but Frank had convinced him to look into the Morgan family situation. What your parents are doing is textbook financial and psychological abuse, David explained. The insurance fraud alone is enough for criminal charges. Add in the theft of your inheritance and trust fund, the coordinated campaign to destroy your business, and the defamation, and you've got a strong case for both civil and criminal prosecution. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. What would that actually look like? It looks like accountability. It looks like restitution for the money they stole and the business they destroyed. And it looks like documentation that will prevent them from doing this to anyone else. David had already started investigating, using Frank's information as a starting point. What he'd found went beyond what even Frank had suspected. Dad's business was in serious financial trouble, kept afloat only by insurance fraud and money stolen from family accounts. Connor's real estate career was built on inflated sales figures and properties that existed only on paper. The whole family empire is a house of cards, David explained. And they've been using you as a scapegoat to distract from their own crimes. When this all comes out, the picture people have of your family is going to change dramatically. That night, I called Dr. Martinez and told her about Frank's evidence and David's investigation. How do you feel about the possibility of your family facing legal consequences? She asked. Terrified, I admitted. But also relieved. For the first time, I feel like I'm not crazy. Like the things I've been experiencing are real and serious and not just me being oversensitive. Gaslighting victims often experience that relief when their reality is finally validated by outside sources. Your family has spent years convincing you that your perceptions were wrong. Having concrete evidence that your perceptions were actually accurate can be incredibly healing. I was still broke, still homeless, still dealing with the wreckage of my professional reputation. But for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I wasn't facing it alone. And I wasn't the one with the most to lose anymore. David Park turned out to be exactly the ally I needed. A former FBI white-collar crime investigator who'd started his own practice after retiring, he had both the skills and the resources to uncover the full scope of my family's criminal activity. More importantly, He had the patience to help me understand that what had happened to me wasn't just family drama, it was systematic financial abuse with serious legal consequences. "The first thing we need to do is document everything," David explained during our first official meeting. "Every conversation, every piece of correspondence, every financial transaction. Your family has been treating this like a personal vendetta, but they've crossed multiple legal lines." Using Frank's notebooks and my own records, we built a timeline that started years before the wedding conflict. The pattern was clear once we laid it all out. Any time I achieved success or independence, my family found ways to undermine or sabotage it. When I'd landed my first major design contract 3 years ago, Dad had suddenly needed help with family business finances, and convinced me to lend him $8,000 that was never repaid. When I'd been featured in a local business magazine, Mom had called the editor to correct some inaccuracies about my background, resulting in a follow-up article that focused more on my family's business success than my own achievements. "This is financial abuse combined with reputation management," David explained. "They've been systematically preventing you from gaining independence while controlling the narrative about who you are and what you're capable of." The insurance fraud was extensive and well documented. Over 3 years, Morgan Construction had filed claims for over $200,000 in equipment theft, storm damage, and workplace injuries that had never actually occurred. Dad had been careful to spread the claims across multiple insurance companies to avoid triggering fraud investigations, but David's experience with financial crimes made the pattern obvious. "Insurance fraud is a felony," David explained. "Each false claim is a separate criminal charge. We're looking at potential jail time, not just fines." Connor's real estate crimes were more complex but equally damaging. He'd been inflating property values on sales reports, taking commissions on properties he'd never actually sold, and using his company's accounts to launder money from the insurance fraud. His lifestyle was completely unsustainable on his legitimate income, and the evidence was hiding in plain sight on his social media accounts. He's been posting photos of luxury vacations and expensive purchases while reporting a modest income on his tax returns. David showed me Connor's Instagram feed alongside his financial records. Either he's committing massive tax evasion or he's funding this lifestyle through criminal activity. Probably both. But it was the defamation campaign that provided the most concrete evidence of intentional harm. David had subpoenaed my former clients' phone records and email accounts, building a clear timeline of the coordinated effort to destroy my business. "This isn't just gossip or family conflict," David explained, showing me a printed timeline. "This is a deliberate conspiracy to damage your professional reputation through false statements about your mental health. Each phone call to your clients is a separate count of defamation per se." The emails between my parents and various relatives were particularly damaging. Mom had been feeding false information about my mental state to family members for over a year, creating a documented paper trail of malicious lies designed to isolate me from potential support systems. One email to my Aunt Carol was especially cruel. "Hazel has been making increasingly paranoid accusations about the family. Her therapist thinks she may be having a psychological break. We're all walking on eggshells, afraid she might do something dangerous. Please don't mention this to her directly, but if she contacts you claiming we've been mistreating her, please remember that paranoid delusions can seem very real to the person experiencing them. This is calculated character assassination," David pointed out. "She's not just sharing concerns, she's actively coaching family members on how to dismiss any complaints you might make about their treatment." The financial investigation revealed the most shocking discovery. Not only had my parents stolen my trust fund and hidden my inheritance, they'd been using my identity to open credit accounts and business lines of credit. My credit report showed 3 business credit cards I'd never applied for, all maxed out and being used to fund Connor's real estate ventures. "This is identity theft," David explained grimly. "They've been using your social security number and business information to secure financing for their son's career. You're legally responsible for debt you never agreed to take on." The total amount of financial damage was staggering. Between the stolen trust fund, the hidden inheritance, the fraudulent debt in my name, and the calculated destruction of my business income, my family had cost me over $300,000 in direct losses and future earnings. "But here's what they didn't count on," David said with the first smile I'd seen from him. Everything they've done is documented. They treated this like a family dispute instead of a criminal conspiracy, so they never tried to hide the evidence. We have everything we need to prosecute. The investigation expanded as David uncovered connections between my family's crimes and other local businesses. Dad's construction company had been systematically overbilling municipal contracts, with Connor's real estate connections helping to identify undervalued properties for the city to purchase at inflated prices. It was a web of corruption that went far beyond family abuse. When this comes out, it's going to make local news, David warned me. Are you prepared for that level of public attention? I thought about the question seriously. Public exposure meant everyone would know about my family's crimes, but it also meant everyone would know that I'd been their victim, not their willing participant. I'm tired of protecting people who destroyed my life to cover their own crimes, I said finally. If public exposure is what it takes to hold them accountable, then I can handle that. David filed the first criminal complaint on a Friday afternoon, targeting the insurance fraud as the most straightforward case to prosecute. By Monday morning, state investigators were at Morgan Construction with boxes and search warrants. The investigation had officially begun. The news that their business was under criminal investigation hit my family like a tsunami. David had coordinated with state investigators, the district attorney's office, and federal authorities investigating the municipal contract fraud. When the search warrants were executed, it wasn't just one agency involved, it was a coordinated law enforcement operation treating Morgan Construction as a criminal enterprise. I found out about the raids from the local news. Channel 7's morning broadcast led with footage of investigators carrying boxes out of Dad's office building, with the headline, "Local Construction Company Under Investigation for Insurance Fraud and Municipal Contract Corruption." My phone started ringing immediately. First Connor, then Mom, then Dad, all demanding to know what I'd done. I let every call go to voicemail and listened to them later with David present. Connor's message was pure rage. "You vindictive bitch. You've destroyed our family business over a stupid wedding invitation. I hope you're happy. Mom's having chest pains and Dad can't even get out of bed. This is all your fault. Mom's was manipulation disguised as heartbreak. Hazel, honey, I don't know what you think we've done, but this investigation is going to hurt innocent people. Uncle Frank is going to lose his pension if the business goes under. Your cousin Tyler works for us too. Please, call me so we can fix this." Dad's was pure threat. "You have no idea what you've started. When this is over, when you've destroyed everything our family built, you'll still be alone. No one's going to want anything to do with someone who destroys their own family for revenge." David listened to each message carefully, taking notes. These are evidence of witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. They're making this worse for themselves with every phone call. The next day, my parents showed up at Emma's apartment where I was still staying. Emma called me at work to warn me they were there, demanding to speak with me. I left my temp job and drove over to find them pacing around her living room like caged animals. "How could you do this to us?" Mom was crying, her perfectly applied makeup streaked down her cheeks. "We're your parents. We raised you, we fed you, we put a roof over your head. You stole from me," I replied calmly. "You destroyed my business, you tried to have me evicted, you lied about my mental health to anyone who would listen. You did this to yourselves." Dad stepped forward, his face red with rage. "You ungrateful little bitch. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? What exactly have you done for me? Because according to the investigation, you've been stealing from me since I was 21. We took that money because Connor needed it more than you did. He was building a career, starting a business. You were just playing around with your little art projects." The casual cruelty of that statement took my breath away. $25,000 of my inheritance, dismissed as less important than Connor's needs. Those weren't art projects. That was my career, which you systematically destroyed because it threatened your narrative about me. Connor burst through Emma's front door without knocking, Brittany close behind him. He looked terrible, unshaven, wrinkled clothes, dark circles under his eyes. "You have to stop this," he said without preamble. The investigators froze all our business accounts. Brittany and I can't even make our mortgage payment. Maybe you should have thought about that before you embezzled from the family business to pay for your lifestyle. Brittany's composure cracked completely. You're jealous that I'm beautiful and successful and you're nothing. You've always been jealous of Connor and me, and now you're trying to destroy us because you can't stand seeing other people happy. I'm not jealous of people who built their happiness on lies and stolen money. We never stole anything from you. Mom shouted. That trust fund money was used for family expenses during a difficult time. You weren't even using it. Because you never told me it existed. The argument escalated for 20 minutes, with each family member trying a different approach. Guilt, threats, blame, manipulation, even attempting to gaslight me about events I had recorded evidence for. Finally, David Park arrived with his briefcase and 2 investigators from the State Attorney General's office. Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, Connor Morgan, Brittany Walsh, Detective Sarah Chin read from her notes. You need to stop contacting the complainant immediately. Any further contact will be considered witness intimidation. The presence of law enforcement changed the dynamic completely. My family went from aggressive confrontation to confused panic in seconds. We're just trying to talk to our daughter, Dad protested. This is a family matter. This is a criminal matter, Detective Chin replied firmly. Insurance fraud, identity theft, defamation, and financial elder abuse are not family matters. They're felony crimes. David opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. We have documentation of everything. Financial records, recorded conversations, email evidence, witness statements. Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, you're facing 12 counts of insurance fraud, 3 counts of identity theft, and 6 counts of defamation. Connor, you're facing embezzlement charges, real estate fraud, and money laundering. The evidence is overwhelming. Mom started crying harder. But we're her family. Surely there's some way to handle this privately. You had opportunities to handle this privately, I said quietly. When I found the trust fund documents, when I discovered the stolen inheritance, when I asked you to stop interfering with my business. Every time, you chose to escalate instead of make things right. What do you want from us? Dad asked, and for the first time, he sounded defeated instead of angry. David answered before I could. Full restitution for financial damages. Public acknowledgement of the defamation campaign. Cooperation with the ongoing investigation. And a permanent restraining order prohibiting contact with my client. We can't afford full restitution, Connor said desperately. The business is underwater. Then you should have thought about that before you committed crimes to fund your lifestyle. The negotiation took 3 hours. In the end, my parents agreed to liquidate business assets, sell their house, and surrender Connor's real estate commissions to pay restitution. The total amount was $460,000, including damages for lost business income and punitive damages for the emotional distress. Connor and Brittany declared bankruptcy, but Connor still faced criminal charges that would likely result in jail time. Dad pleaded guilty to avoid a trial that would have sent him to federal prison, accepting 5 years of community service and 10 years of probation. Mom got 3 years of community service for her role in the identity theft and defamation. The business dissolved completely, leaving Uncle Frank unemployed but eligible for pension benefits through the court settlement. He moved to Florida to live near his daughter and sent me postcards from the beach. 6 months later, I bought my parents' house at the court-ordered auction. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The daughter they'd tried to hide away from family gatherings now owned the family gathering place. I renovated it completely, turning the main floor into a design studio and the upper floor into my living space. The first client meeting I held there was with Mrs. Peterson, whose husband had been so complimentary at Connor's wedding. She hired me to redesign their entire chain of boutique hotels, a contract worth more than I'd made in the previous 3 years combined. 2 years later, I stood in what used to be my childhood bedroom, now converted into a bright workspace filled with design equipment and mood boards for current projects. The morning light streamed through windows I'd had enlarged during the renovation, illuminating fabric samples and color palettes for a luxury resort project in Costa Rica. My business had recovered beyond my wildest expectations. The media coverage of my family's crimes had initially felt embarrassing, but it ultimately led to numerous clients who admired my resilience and integrity. When people Googled my name now, they found articles about a successful designer who'd overcome family abuse, not the mentally unstable daughter my parents had tried to create. The therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez had evolved from crisis management to genuine healing. We'd worked through the layers of gaslighting and emotional abuse, helping me understand that my family's treatment of me had never been about my worth as a person. It had been about their need to maintain control and their fear of anyone who threatened their carefully constructed narrative. Narcissistic families often designate one child as the scapegoat, Dr. Martinez had explained during one of our early sessions. That child bears the blame for all family problems and serves as a distraction from the real dysfunction. Breaking free from that role requires recognizing that the problem was never you. The support group had become a chosen family of sorts. Maria, the woman whose parents had disowned her for her marriage, had become one of my closest friends. Together, we'd learned that family isn't defined by blood relations but by people who choose to support and celebrate each other. My relationship with Marcus, the wedding photographer who'd refused to delete my pictures, had developed slowly and carefully. He understood trauma in a way that came from his own experience with family rejection after coming out as gay. Our first real date had been to a support group meeting, and he'd held my hand while I shared my story with a room full of strangers. "You know what I love about you?" he'd told me after that meeting. "You've been through hell and you came out stronger, not bitter. That takes incredible strength." The financial settlement had given me security I'd never experienced before. I'd paid off my student loans, invested in my business, and still had enough left over to establish a small foundation providing legal aid to other victims of family financial abuse. David Park served on the advisory board, helping identify cases where his expertise could make a difference. Connor had served 18 months in minimum security prison and was now working as a construction laborer for one of his former competitors. Brittany had divorced him while he was incarcerated and moved back to her hometown. They'd lost everything they'd built on stolen money, but Connor seemed oddly relieved when I'd run into him at the grocery store 6 months after his release. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me," he'd said, looking genuinely remorseful for the first time in his life. "But I wanted you to know that I understand now how wrong we were. Prison gives you a lot of time to think, and I realized how much we hurt you." I'd nodded but kept my distance. Forgiveness didn't require reconciliation, and I'd learned to protect my peace above all else. Mom had reached out through Uncle Frank on my birthday, asking if there was any possibility of rebuilding our relationship. I'd considered it carefully before declining. Some wounds cut too deep for healing, and some trust, once shattered, couldn't be rebuilt. Dad had suffered a minor heart attack during his first year of community service, and for a moment I'd felt the old impulse to rush to his side, to be the dutiful daughter who put family above everything else. But Dr. Martinez had helped me recognize that feeling obligated to care for people who deliberately harmed me wasn't love or loyalty, it was trauma bonding. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and genuine care, she'd reminded me. Obligation and guilt aren't love. The house renovation had been therapeutic in unexpected ways. Tearing down walls that had contained so many painful memories, choosing new colors and textures that reflected who I was becoming rather than who I'd been expected to be. The kitchen where I'd been told I wasn't pretty enough for family photos now hosted design client meetings where I was valued for my creativity and expertise. My favorite addition was the garden. I'd hired a landscape designer to create a space that felt like a sanctuary, with winding paths and quiet corners perfect for morning coffee or evening reflection. It was everything my mother's rigid, formal landscaping had never been: wild, creative, authentically beautiful. Standing in that garden on a crisp October morning, coffee in hand, I thought about the person I'd been 2 years ago. The woman who'd been so desperate for family acceptance that she'd tolerated abuse, theft, and systematic destruction of her dreams. That woman had believed her worth was determined by other people's approval, that family loyalty meant accepting unacceptable treatment. I'd learned that real family doesn't ask you to make yourself smaller to accommodate their comfort. Real family celebrates your successes instead of sabotaging them. Real family protects you from harm instead of being the source of it. The most important lesson had been about forgiveness, not as something I owed to people who'd hurt me, but as something I could choose for my own peace. I'd forgiven my family not because they deserved it or earned it, but because carrying anger was exhausting, and I had better things to do with my energy. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and it definitely didn't mean allowing toxic people back into my life. I'd built boundaries as solid as the new walls in my renovated home, and I protected them fiercely. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "How's the morning reflection going? Still planning to take over the design world?" I smiled, typing back, "One luxury resort at a time. See you for dinner? Wouldn't miss it. Love you." Love. Real love, the kind that celebrated my successes and supported my dreams. The kind that asked what I needed instead of telling me what I should want. The kind that saw my strength instead of trying to convince me I was weak. As I headed back inside to start my workday, I passed the mirror in my front hallway. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the broken, desperate person who'd written a suicide note 2 years ago. This woman had clear eyes, confident posture, and the kind of inner peace that comes from finally understanding your own worth. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies, it's refusing to let them define your story. My family had tried to write me as the villain, the crazy daughter, the family embarrassment who needed to be managed and controlled. But I'd taken back my pen and written my own ending. And it was a beautiful story, filled with chosen family, meaningful work, and the kind of happiness that comes from living authentically. The kind of happiness that can't be stolen, sabotaged, or destroyed by people who mistake control for love. The phone rang, another potential client, another opportunity to build something beautiful with my talents and creativity. I answered with a smile, ready to turn someone else's vision into reality, knowing that I'd finally learned the most important lesson of all. You teach people how to treat you, and you always have the choice to walk away from anyone who treats you like you're worth less than you are. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling with toxic family dynamics. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help other people find it, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming life's challenges and finding your inner strength. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're worthy of real love and respect, because sometimes we all need that reminder. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, it's determined by how you choose to treat yourself.